Dan Blanchard, the CEO, founder, and of course, captain, I should say, Captain Dan Blanchard of UnCruise. Such a pleasure to be speaking with you again. UnCruise Adventures, UnCruise, just like it sounds.com. No lines, no crowds, never boring. Dan, thanks for taking the time again. I was really excited to get to speak with you. How have things been since we spoke?
It is interesting. We really, as we look at this period of time as businesses expand, and I think in every Main Street USA, we're all getting used to just a lot of boarded up buildings, and people working from home and towers not being filled with workers like they used to be. As we look at that, the business side of UnCruise Adventures becomes, not that it wasn't important before, but it becomes a benefit to everyone, because if we manage to be profitable in 21 and 22, that gives people that are booking the assurance that, wow, this company is already on recovery. We don't have to worry about, coming up to their door one day and it's boarded up. And so,
right.
When we sit there and talk about the advantages of UnCruise today, one of them is like, not only we're successful, and we're not just successful for what we do in the field, but we're successful on the balance sheet as well.
That's such a valid point. I actually have a few dear friends who before I had informed them about UnCruise, they had booked another cruise up in the area, and they then got an email letting them know that their cruise was canceled due to loss of employees, etc., and they would not be getting their money back. And that was that.
Unfortunately, I think the world of travel, whether it's an airline or a cruise or staying at a land resort, has been, seeing challenges like that. As you mentioned, your friend mentioned that, I think you said something along the idea that, staffing last year was a big issue across much of the world, but specifically in the United States. The good thing is this year is we're certainly not seeing that being an issue going forward into 2023.
And I imagine for you, I would think that, well, now coming out of COVID and whatnot, but your staff, obviously, just as you are, just as every person that works with you, such as Liz, et cetera, in every aspect, but your staff on these adventures, they're so key and important because, again, of the way that UnCruise does cruises and the way that you give people the opportunity to engage with whether it's the Alaskan wildlife and nature, or also I wanted to mention, so I was, of course, looking at, so you've added three more new ones, Dan. You have new Prince William Sound, you have new Winter Sports Cruise, and then you have new Costa Rica to Cartagena.
Yeah, it's those all roll out in 2024.
Okay.
We're obviously finishing up the details. Now, it's interesting that in the case of Costa Rica, Panama Canal to Cartagena, Colombia, that was a route that we were going to ignite in the fall of 2020. Obviously, didn't take place. So that one's coming back. We rejigged it a little bit, made a little bit longer trip, this kind of thing. But that is kind of again, one of those items that now we're able to reignite. But the other two are truly joys in the sense that they're new to us. The one right here in Juneau, where we have this winter sports and Northern Lights or the Safari Endeavor for 6 weeks from early February to mid-March in 24. That will blow your socks off. I mean, it's not only the ability to get up and snowshoe and ski or cross-country ski, downhill board, whatever, or maybe even skate on a frozen lake, which typically happens every winter. But it's also the ability to get out and see Glacier Bay National Park and Tracy Arm and Endicott Arm and actually do some winter cruising where, it snows right down to sea level. It actually, Southeast Alaska looks more like Antarctica during the winter months. It's for people who there, they kind of go, my gosh, I didn't realize this is just like Antarctica. But of course, the advantage is about a quarter of the cost going to Antarctica, which, hopefully will bring some of our guests over. We're really excited about that one. And it's been decades since I have run Prince William Sound commercially.
That's amazing. And that's definitely something to talk about because, as I'm obviously you know more than I do, but Antarctica it seems to be so very prevalent and top of mind right now.
It is, and for good reason. We're all seeing climate change. We want to get to these northern and southern regions so we can experience it. Antarctica has gotten extremely competitive. A lot of vessels down there. And so ours is a twist on, see the kind of beauty you see in Antarctica in the winter in Alaska, but also have this little ski town called Juneau, Alaska, to be able to strap on your skis or go for a snowshoe or just sit in the hot tub in the snow and then you grab a cocktail. It's all available.
That is, again, it's something to, in my opinion, really touch upon because also if that is the, quote unquote destination someone wants to take, i.e., something in the genre of, say, Antarctica, but to be able to go to Alaska, one, it's, much easier. Especially for North Americans who we're primarily speaking to, and then further to then, as you just touched upon, you can experience a lot more. You can really experience a bit more of life than you would doing the alternative. And with respect to, if you don't mind me asking a little bit more about the, it really piqued my interest because I'm currently reading Jimmy Buffett's Pirate Looks His 50, and he wrote it obviously 20 years. He wrote it 20 years ago when he was turning 50, but near the last 25% of the book, one of his bucket lists was going to Cartagena, and he really expands upon the magic of it and the depth of it and whatnot. What made you choose Cartagena?
Well, having read the book, I would say very similar to Jimmy Buffett, but with a twist. For me, I started traveling to Colombia on my own, just private travel time, probably 15 years ago. And one thing that amazed me about Colombia, about the people, they are just unbelievably open and friendly. I don't think there was a night when we were going to Colombia. We did it partly by skiff on a river and then partly by overland and partly by backpack. So I was kind of reliving my 20s a little bit. But there wasn't a night when we were hiking or around the small villages of Colombia where we didn't get invited to dinner in people's homes. And it didn't come with any strings attached. It just was the beauty of the people. And that was actually the first piece. And then eventually I never expected the walled city of Cartagena to blow me away like it did. And so it wasn't the first thing I went and did, but on my maybe third trip to Colombia, I got to Cartagena, the walled city in the history. We think here we are in the United States, and we find something old to be from 1930, and really old if it was before 1900. And you go to South America and Cartagena, and they were much more advanced than we were.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. It's pretty amazing.
It's shocking. I mean, to go to places where Columbus sailed into, and where Drake and Morgan were at.
Captain Drake, as Jimmy talks about as well in the book. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean it's over the top.
And it's interesting. You said you read the book, yes?
Yeah, when it first came out, so it's been a few years.
Yeah, but so if you recall, the way you just described it was perfect, and you were describing it from your own experience, but he talks about the magic of seeing that walled city. And then he touches upon Captain Drake, who's one of his favorites, etc. But he said the power, and this is an individual such as you that's traveled, to so many different places. He said, but the magic and the power of that and the history, as you just touched upon. And so Dan, when you, with respect to your plans and say, again, you have new Costa Rica, two Cartagenas we're touching upon. You just mentioned the winter sports cruise. You have new Prince William Sound. But so obviously, not obviously, but when you do Alaska, which is your backyard and you know it inside and out, it's truly your genius. So when you go to Cartagena, what is it that UnCruise presents to the fortunate passengers that then become your friends and take those trips? How does UnCruise do that differently, just as they do it in Alaska with a place such as Cartagena?
Well, I think that it just one by the nature of group size and the type of client we get. We shift. So, for instance, you will go to somebody who goes on a big ship to Cartagena. They're going to have a chance to take tours and such, and just like us, we're going to, but we may have a morning run on top of the wall, or a walk, or a
How
hike
amazing
on the
would that
top of
be?
the wall. Because isn't that cool? When you actually go there, the thickness of that wall is amazing, and so there's different ways to see it than just going through knick-knack shops and this kind of thing. Although there are some really great local handicrafts that can't be passed up. But then the bigger part of what we do is when we get underway and visit some of the remote areas of Colombia. Panama used to be part of Colombia back before the Panama Canal and this kind of thing. And so you find out when you get to these island groups or with the indigenous people, the connections they have from in Panama and Panama has in Colombia is quite strong culturally. So I think that adds a lot. And we get to the border towns, we hike a trail between the two border towns, and these are just small villages way outside the normal realm of life for a visitor. And I think the really great thing for us about, a lot of times people, when they think about Panama Canal Cruise, they think, oh, well, I did that, 8 years ago on a Carnival ship.
Right.
And it's not the same thing as you do with UnCruise, because what happens when you go with UnCruise, you're actually visiting all the small islands and coves and this kind of thing on your way to and from the canal zone. So it's an entirely different experience than going on a large ship for sure.
Is that because, Dan, you bring up a really, really great point that I don't think we've discussed before. Is that because due to your having your smaller exceptional ships, you can pull into many different ports and locations that you would like, versus the larger carnivals, et cetera, since you use that name, they have to pull into a designated cruise port. Are you able to alternatively negotiate and establish locations that you can bring your fortunate guests to that they can't even remotely consider?
Yeah, absolutely. The MO for us when we started this business 27 years ago is we're going to go to the same places I would go in my sailboat, my 42-foot sailboat.
You've mentioned your
as
boat.
a guest of those places. And that is why we do. I got back from 3 years sailing the Pacific with my family. I went back to my cruise industry job, was bored to tears, and that led to UnCruise Adventures, because I honestly believe that what we see, with 1,000 people, 3,000, 6,000 people on a large ship is entirely different than what you see with, in that case, a 66 passenger vessel, which can get to the same places I took my sailboat so many years ago.
That's amazing. It's truly like you really are, and I'm. If you're fine with it, I'm fine using it as another example with respect to you're giving people an opportunity to experience life in a way that fantastic individuals such as, well, one, yourself, but further say the Jimmy Buffetts and really amazing people have traveled that they couldn't and again, you look at a Carnival cruise or any cruise line, and they're baffling to me. I mean, they're literally a city. They're bigger than cities, and they, it's getting on a boat that has a mall. It has, so many things that, okay, sure, maybe you think you want that, but you're not really escaping and experiencing these places you're going to the way you should, because you're just transferring one version of your life into a ship, and having a lot of cocktails and having fun. But with UnCruise, when you get on, as you just said, a 60 plus whatever passenger ship, and then be able to go to ports and experience life in a way that pirates and Captain Drakes and Dan Blanchards and Jimmy Buffetts have done it, that's life changing. That's truly, truly life changing, and that's such a gift to be able to give that to people.
It is, and I think when you look at it as it's kind of small group exploring and really trying to take in the place. There's one place just in kind of near the San Blas Islands where Christopher Columbus was sailing one day, and it's a big blow, and he had to turn around because his son got quite sick that was on board. You hear that whole story, and then nearby is where Drake's body supposedly is at, in a coffin many feet deep in the ocean.
Yeah.
And you share this history and learn this history firsthand on a boat very similar in size to what Drake had, slightly larger.
So you sound like you're a fan of Drake. Yes.
Well, I think he's a tremendous person in history for sure. I appreciate what took place in Panama with Drake and Morgan, and the invasion of the old Panama City at one time, long before the canal. And when you read that history, I find it amazing as you go into Portobello in Panama, for instance, and here lies a port. I believe, I could be wrong, and this is San Lorenzo as well. I believe it was in 1542 or 1532, someplace in that area, that these forts were built, and they're literally sitting in the jungle today, just with jungle grown up around them. Of course, they're parks, and to step foot in there, and all the books I had read, you've read as well, about that period in time, and realizing you're standing there on the same structure that was put up so long ago. For a Westerner in the United States, it's amazing history.
I agree with you 100%. And I, due to Jimmy's to that book, I did a bit of research on Drake because I found it fascinating, and the way that he personally went about literally doing all the exceptional, amazing things he did at that time with no technology in comparison to today, but did it literally out of a vendetta and just kind of a wicked smile on his face of not being keen on the King of Spain at the time. I think it's fantastic. And again, it wasn't, he wasn't flying around in planes. He wasn't some, modern, he living in that time, and it was just on these ships and being such a master navigator. I would imagine for you, Dan, being the person you are and having the experience you have, and with UnCruise and prior to sailing around for 3 years as you did, to kind of feel to a certain extent like I can almost perhaps on a certain level relate to what this guy might have been seeing and what he was experiencing more than any, as you, to use the term you just did, any, American or Westerner can even comprehend.
Well, it certainly is an eye-opening experience to go there and realize, even when I sailed, we didn't, we had an early GPS and late sat nav on board, and but to think about Drake out there with a quadrant and a hope for good weather so that he can get his sightings in, it just, the dead reckoning they have getting into the mariner's world that, they used to call it dead reckoning, we still do, trying to predict where you're at when you can't necessarily take a shot of the sun or the stars, and trying to figure out your position and dealing with tides and wind. What Drake did was phenomenal.
Phenomenal.
Just absolutely phenomenal.
And isn't it true? And then we'll dig much more significantly into UnCruise. But didn't Cartagena, the walls there, in Cartagena, they are built as thick as they are to a certain extent to basically ward off the drakes of the day, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was a center for gold transportation, as was Portobello, and the walls are amazingly thick. Until you actually get there and see it, you just hard to imagine that they could put a walled city up that is that heavily fortified at that time in history.
Isn't it incredible? I've mentioned to, having spent some time in the Northeast and whatnot, where they have, these canals along the Delaware River and whatnot. And you think back on, okay, so, it's similar to, say, Cartagena, or you look at Egypt, et cetera, but you look back and you think, okay, people built these amazing inventions, and they did it with just brute hard work. And I had said I was having a conversation with some entrepreneurs. I said, if you had a project right now and you tried to find I challenge you, even say 100 people to commit to doing what those people did at that time, you couldn't find them. They those types of people, in my opinion, don't even exist anymore. And it's because of the way they lived and the way they had to experience it. And it was what you did. We're going to move these blocks. We're going to build these walls. But if you task someone now, in my opinion, to do that, I think it would be unfathomable to find people that could just do it with brute force and human strength.
Yeah, it takes a lot of dedication, and it's an amazing feat, to say the least.
And speaking of dedication and amazing feats, such as what you have created with UnCruise, so when you look now, Dan, I imagine you don't find it daunting, you just find it exciting. But so UnCruise Adventures, again, UnCruise.com, Captain Dan Blanchard. And then when you scroll through all destinations, Mexico / Sea of Cortez, Alaska, obviously, new Prince William Sound we've touched upon, new winter sports cruise, new Costa Rica to Cartagena, Hawaiian Islands, Colombian Snake Rivers, San Juan Islands, Costa Rica, Panama, Belize, Guatemala, Galapagos, that's amazing, the Juno Shore excursions and tours, cruise combo packages, land packages. From when you started it to now, when you look at that list, do you find it daunting, or do you just find it simply amazing and exciting?
I find it very fun. I think obviously I'm an Alaska boy through heart and soul. I wasn't born there, but it's my home. And for an Alaska boy to sit there and go, oh my gosh, this is great that people came to see us in Alaska. Let's open up as much of the world as we can, so that people can still travel with us, after Alaska. And many guests return to Alaska multiple times, but the fact that they will then, travel with us to these other destinations is super valuable to me, because, people like to say, oh, you joined the UnCruise cult. It's one of my travel writers at one time. And, there's a little bit of truth to that, because, we are very much look for the client that wants much more in life than, the 5,000 passengers on a ship, and that are being, whether they recognize it or not, being controlled throughout their trip, even when on shore, what they see. It's all set up. They're, even controlled by the cities where they're allowed to take tours and where they can't, and this type of thing. And then you step in on a cruise where basically you're in an environment with very similar-minded people, and the controls are kind of like the shackles are being lifted off, and 3, 2, 1, blast off. Let's go. So yeah, it feels good that over the years we have organically grown, and that I'm still 100% in control of the company. I'm not being motivated by a private equity firm that stands behind me telling me what to do.
Right.
We're really thinking about our guests and our ability to, within that model, take us to a new place. I grew up in the church, right? And I was even a preacher when I was young. And
I didn't know
one
that.
of the things I used to preach the gospel on the streets of San Francisco and Seattle pretty regularly.
Huh.
my teens and early 20s. But part of that, and it's a carry through for me, is that I care about people. And my mom used to say that Danny, you've got the biggest heart. And that has to be part of what we do. So it's for me, there's the, make profit as business, have to be able to survive. But there's a much bigger part to me that wants to be involved in people loving their life. I'm not a preacher anymore, haven't been, not even a direction I think about for decades and decades. But the part that wants to make sure that when people come with us, that they have a personal, almost spiritual experience, in the wilderness, in the quiet places in this world that just blow your socks off. That's, to me, that is the most satisfying thing I can do. And it's why, that all the destinations you mentioned, that is why we go there, is because we found that in Alaska. And now we're going to replicate it in these destinations where people can feel like, wow, I was just on a damn sailboat with him for 3 years, or maybe just 1 week. But at those places that are so unique.
That's amazing. What a very, very well said, as always. You're so incredibly well spoken. But what a beautiful way to describe what you do, how you do it, and why you do it. Really authentic and fantastic. So thank you for that. And so for those that, because now I've almost had the fortune of having 30 minutes of your time once again, Dan. So for those that are, now we're already unbelievably almost at the end of January for the sake of conversation, for those that, whether they, oh, and by the way, I'm not sure if Liz has relayed this to you, but very excited to have you, you/UnCruise, depending on how you guys want to do it. You're going to be on the upcoming spring cover of Elevated Jet Center magazine, which I'm thrilled about. I think it's going to be one of the best covers it's going to be one of the best covers we've ever done. And so for those that right now, it's January 17th, and they're looking at the year ahead for 2023, what does the availability look like for UnCruise? And if people are thinking about, in your opinion, right now at this moment in time, just looking at 2023, what are of all the destinations we've now discussed, which ones are the ones to be thinking about now and looking at booking to do something in 2023 with UnCruise?
Well, Alaska primarily. I mean, the timing right now is what the industry calls the wave season, which happens, sometime after the first week in January and generally goes to early April. And that is the period of time where summertime destinations book very heavy. We had our biggest day since 2019 last week in sales, like 350% over last year's.
Congratulations, that's amazing.
Oh my gosh, it's so nice to see it back. But I think that
350%, that's incredible.
300. I'm just looking at it's 352% last week, and so to see that increase over 2022 sales tells us that the market's returning.
I think it says that in a very strong way.
It does. But it also tells the guest, the client, people looking to travel that book now because space is going up. We still have some carryover from people that couldn't sail during the pandemic. It used to require a vaccine. Now that has been lifted recently, so those people are coming back that maybe were booked in 20 or 21. And so what you're finding is a lot of summertime destinations right now, including UnCruise, are booking very heavily. So last year and the year before, people that traveled could sit there and say, well, I'm just going to wait till the last minute. You can't do that this year, or you're not going to have a space. And that's right. For all travel, quite frankly. So the return to travel is definitely happening. We're experiencing it right now, as you say, the January through March, early April period is typically we're going to see our summertime trips in the Galapagos, in Alaska, Columbia Snake River, those kind of places are really booking solid right now.
And so now is now. It's very time sensitive for people that are interested in 2023. And then further, they should also be looking at 2024 because UnCruise is delivering at an unparalleled level what really no one else is delivering. And due to, and I imagine your retention rate with guests and people rebooking, whether it's with the same cruise or going to one of the many other amazing destinations you offer now, it must be very high.
Yeah, it is. And we're seeing more of our past guests return, for instance, to Alaska this year because, they remember their trips there in the past. But the pandemic has kind of presented, the lack of travel, lack of availability of certain things. So a lot of people are kind of, returning to places they really loved this first time around to travel, post-pandemic, I should say. And so what we're seeing is a lot of our guests are going, I just want to go back to Alaska. I just want to see it, see those sights, and breathe in that clear air.
Yeah.
Kind of as a restart to traveling.
Yeah. That makes perfect sense. And once again, very well said. I think I'm going to have to get up there and give it a shot as well. Captain Dan Blanchard, along with being captain, also CEO, founder, general manager, and basically, again, the genius behind UnCruise Adventures, UnCruise.com. Dan, I could literally, if I was so fortunate, speak to you all day. That being said, I know you're incredibly busy and you have much more important things to do than speak to me. Is there anything I didn't ask you today or anything we didn't discuss that you would like to?
Well, you forgot my final title.
What's that?
Cheap bottle washer. I mean, in UnCruise, we all take pride in the fact that the title means something, but getting the job done means everything. So I will just say that it won't be uncommon if people listening come to Juneau in a panic. It's all hands on deck. I'll help check people in. I'll help handle bags. That's just what we do. So add cheap bottle washer next time.
Thank you very much for that laugh. Dan, such
good chatting with you, Jed. And we do have we gotta get you up to Alaska this season. You gotta carve out some time for me.
Okay, well, I will take that as a personal invite, and let's connect offline, and we will, or off podcast, and we will. I will take you up on that. I will. I've never been. It's I've lived in amazing places such as Aspen, Telluride, etc., but I've never done Alaska as it pertains to quote unquote snow country, and I would absolutely love to. So thank you for mentioning that, and let's see if you and Liz and I can get it set up.
Sounds good.
All right, my friend, Dan Blanchard, again, thank you so much for taking the time. UnCruise Adventures, Break Up with Boring, UnCruise.com. Dan, have a fantastic rest of your day, and thank you so much for taking the time, and thank you very much continuously for the opportunity to work with you and Liz.
Thank you. Looking forward to our next conversation.
Me too. Let's make sure it's sooner this time.
All right.
Take care. Bye-bye.